Welcome back to the Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, the Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, generating some innovative technology for knocking down fires or stopping them from moving around because we're using jet engines to blow retardant at 20 acres a minute, which hopefully will do something. And we'll find out when this prototype gets off the factory floor in March. Well, there's a lot of people actually doing innovative work to protect communities and assets from wildfire. And one of the really interesting developments is that now the ownership of wildfire preparation is moving more and more towards private organizations and being run under the helm of people who come from business rather than just being a function of the public sector. And a prime example of this is my guest today, Jason Brooks, who's the co-founder of 𝐼RE, who is working in many communities to make them safer, more resilient to wildfire. Welcome to the Fire Break, Jason. How are you today?
Yeah, doing great. Thanks so much for having me, Steve, and appreciate all the work you do in highlighting all the innovation and efforts that people are putting out there.
It's necessary, and people realize that now. And I think there's been a kind of a sea change, certainly on the entrepreneurial side, to realize that the government is not going to fix all of this for us. That there's a lot of room for innovation. If they're going to do it, they're going to do it with the participation of innovators and people who come from CEO backgrounds and whatnot, the way you do. What are you seeing
Absolutely.
in the industry right now?
So we're seeing a lot of things to that point. I mean, I think definitely we started 𝐼RE several years ago, truly just to solve a personal problem. I always tell people I just didn't want my house to burn down, and I really wanted to know what to do. And if I'm being honest, the product I got at the time from my local government wasn't great. It's a piece of paper that kind of was like remove vegetation, and so that wasn't as prescriptive as I wanted. But so to fast forward into what we're seeing now, we're seeing a lot more interest in, I think, thematic areas around local government trying to help their residents. The community wants to know what to do, so they're really trying to do that. They realize there's data gaps. They just don't really know what, like we'll call the ground truth is in and around all these homes ahead of time. And just a push to be truly, I mean, we see this in DC, but everywhere, to be more efficient. If local government's going to be providing services to members of the community, how do they do it efficiently? And that implies all the way down to like fire prevention.
So for an example or a parallel here, if you were to ask people in 1980, is the post office doing a good job? I guess so. There's nothing to compare it to. Right. And then come 1981, now there's FedEx, and like, oh my God, we never realized what a crappy job the government did delivering mail. Now that they have a private for-profit competitor. And I'm wondering to what degree, we're going to see similar comparisons drawn. And when I say this, like, no dispersions against anyone. I know everyone in the government does the best job that they can with the circumstances they're working in and the tools they have. But at the end of the day, that may not be enough, especially when we can compare that to, what organizations like 𝐼RE provide, where there's just massively more efficiency.
Yeah, I mean, the things I would comment on, though, I don't know that the analogy totally works for me. Only, but to your point of it's been lack of either investment or support for building some of these tools, right? The reason agencies had paper was because they didn't really have any other options, right? They weren't either given the budget or the funding. I think what we're seeing is more. You have really, I always think these local fire chiefs are just so innovative, but they're not always given the resources, and so you're seeing more tax measures. I think the past 5 to 7 years has really created a lot of community support at the groundswell. And so, where I live in Marin, there was a tax measure, 72%, 73% of the voters approved being taxed specifically for wildfire prevention. We're seeing that model play out elsewhere. And the reason I bring that up is it's finally giving some of these government agencies funding, if you will, to be able to now invest in innovative tools and partnership like ours. So I really think of like us as like a public-private partnership, and that they have needs. We're a private company. We can implement them pretty efficiently.
Yeah, I think we're probably going to find ourselves in the same position.
Definitely.
Kind of the way the military doesn't invent things, right? They
Agreed.
buy their munitions from whoever and their guns from planes, etc. Right.
Yeah.
innovation.
And they see the problems, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure as you do, right? We talk to some of these fire departments. I mean, some of these things aren't new. I mean, they've been knowing and working on, government, if you will, and some of these fire agencies. I mean, they've been working on this problem for decades, right? And
Right.
so it's almost like finally society has sort of caught up with them a little bit, and the public
Yes, that's
will has
right.
caught up that
Yeah.
you couldn't get a tax measure passed 10, 15 years ago to fund, $20 million a year in 𝐬𝐻𝐫𝐸 case for wildfire prevention. I mean, there wasn't the political will, but now there absolutely is in Sonoma, Napa. You're just seeing it play out elsewhere.
Yeah. And I think there's more fire. It's more devastating. But it's also visually good news fodder.
Yep.
And so, right, if we were to look at the total number of people affected by various conditions, fires might not be the biggest one, but in public perception it is, because the other things aren't as newsworthy in the sense, like, they're not on fire, right?
Yep.
They're not bleeding, they're not visual, and so there might be medical conditions or education conditions that are impacting people tremendously, but it's just not it doesn't make as good news. So
Yeah. Well, I
we're
also think,
fortunate in that sense, right?
sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think, one of the things I've noticed too is there's also, compared to perhaps some of the other disasters, there's a feeling that we can actually do something about fire. I mean, I started Fireside because we actually should not.
Right.
It is possible to not lose every single home to fire. It is possible. I know that
Right.
you can say the same thing about necessarily earthquake or necessarily flood or some of these other things, right? The scale and the scope is too big, but fire is something, and this, right? Is something that actually can be mitigated and prevented, right? So I just think there's a different feeling about there's something that people can do to actually change the outcomes in a way that's maybe different than some of the other perils that are out there.
Let me ask you about positioning for Fireside.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an endless number of players coming in to help communities in different ways. How do you brand what Fireside offers communities uniquely from other offerings?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think we do a couple different things that when we position ourselves is we very much focused on the ground game and resident engagement. So, there's a lot of tech out there, and there's people talk about satellite and they'll talk about, drone AI, and we play around with all of that.
No
But
satellites to protect your house.
or tell you what's underneath your deck that's going to take out your house, right? Or do these, and we played around with like self-collection apps and all these. We experimented with all of it, and we continue to. But I think ultimately, to answer your question on how we sort of brand ourselves, the local fire department, they have to serve their community. That's their job. That's their mission. That's what they're super amazing at that. And so how do you give the local fire department the best possible tools to help them serve their local community, which is educating homeowners, educating residents in there is sort of like part one. And part two is how do we give them engagement tools to get people to better, I'll call it, meet people where they are and take journey in there. Like, marketing is not a new science. Marketing's been around forever, but the fire department, and I've had a chief say this to me, he's like, we've been doing the same thing for 100 years. We give everyone the same message, the same thing. How do we evolve it? So from Fireside's perspective, we can tailor the messaging, we can meet people where they are in their journey, and essentially giving these fire departments tools that they simply didn't have access to, last year, 2 years ago, that kind of thing. So that answers the question. Two ultimate points around there: giving them good ways and good tools to like serve the public when they're out there doing local evaluations, and then helping give them engagement tools to get residents to take action effectively.
Okay, so when an end user is using the benefits of your service, do they know that they're using a Fireside service, or is it positioned that this is something coming from the fire department?
So we're white label. It's always coming from the fire department or the Fire Safe Council or the HOA. I mean, we work with why any community organization, right? So a lot can sort of think, if you think of them in those umbrellas, but in the case of Boulder, it's coming from the city of Boulder. In the case of, Prescott, it's coming from the city of Prescott, et cetera, that kind of thing. So very much powered. Think of us as white label, powered by Fireside.
It's the secret engine under the hood.
Yeah. People don't want to have a relationship with Fireside. I mean, and nor do I necessarily believe they should have a relationship with us. They do want to have a relationship with their local fire department, right? I mean, fire departments are any sort of survey work that's done, people love their fire department. The fire department does great work. They're heroes. And so people want that relationship. And so how do we just make it easier for the fire departments to have a better two-way communication with residents individually versus kind of a one-size-fits-all?
I see. And how do you help fire departments into this new role? Because I would imagine initially fire department, we're here to put out fires. Like, we're not educators, we're not community outreach people. Like, this all got put on us because the word fire was in both scenarios, right? It happened to be in the word fire prevention, but like, we got into this to put out fires. So how do you help them into that transition so that they could not only do the outreach and the education, but do it well and enjoy it?
Yeah, so I think what we've seen is, I mean, every fire department has some prevention role, right? We know that, right? Whether it's just doing commercial checks for sprinklers or or what, I mean, checking schools for
Right. Check the
exits. I mean,
elevator, right?
yeah, I mean, there's, I mean, there's, 100+ years, let's say, of history in the fire service for doing prevention work. What I think is new or is evolved, I mean, because it has been going on in some communities, but what has evolved is really how does that prevention role scale out into the residential area, and also how do you do it where you don't necessarily have what I'll describe it as like enforcement. I mean, if the
Yeah.
fire department says you need sprinklers over this oven in a restaurant, they can shut the place down. I mean, it's either fix
Right.
it or you don't. But if I tell Steve he's got to replace his wood siding on his roof, what do they? They can't. They can say please. They can say So this new world, to answer your question,
They
how we're
would think
helping
there's
them.
something
So
wrong with me too for putting siding on my roof.
yeah, exactly, right. Or
Right.
yeah, bad example. So how do you help? Like so helping these
Yeah.
fire departments, what I'll call in the kind of hearts and minds in that education place is a new
Yeah.
mission. So backing
Right.
up, I mean, our agencies, the ones, we're in 8 states now, tend to work with agencies that are probably a little bit more early adopters than maybe some of
Okay.
their peers, but we're kind of moved past that stage. And we're looking to make change. I mean, I think that the common theme of these themes is we meet with chiefs and they're like, I want to do better for my public. I want to give my public better tools. And so when they say that, they immediately
Yeah.
that's kind of where we anchor in on and kind of help them
Okay.
out.
So I'm a fire chief. I want to do
Yep.
better. I want to engage my
Yep.
community more. I examine my options. Hopefully, you're in my inbox and you've put something in your subject line that makes me reply to you, and we start a conversation. What exactly? What's the offer?
So
What's
what
the
we're
pitch?
giving
Like,
them.
what are you telling?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll back up one thing. We've been very fortunate that most of our work today has been inbound
In,
referrals, right? So
inbound.
we
Yeah.
still so usually it's like you've heard about us from one of your neighboring agencies, which is,
Okay.
again, we're very very gratified by that. Um, but having said that, when we're sitting down with the fire department, it's really going to come down to a couple different things on the pitch. Principally, do you want to be able to scale more of your defensible space evaluations and home hardening? Like, if you're saying I want to do more of these in my community, then we can show you the efficiency tools. Berkeley, City of Berkeley said they cut out like 90% of their second follow-ups once they used our platform, right? So we can just show them
Wow.
things like that will make
Yeah.
them how examples, but this is how the software can. So part one, do you just essentially want to be more efficient? Part two is, how do you want to engage with your residents? Do you want to meet them? We'll call it in innovative online tools, sort of like, what other services in society provide to residents. How do you want to provide that best experience? And so, our platform is it's accessible, it's bilingual. We're tracking, we look at every single analytics. It looks and feels similar to like a marketing platform. I mean, this is what it's designed to do, is track interactions, who clicked on what thing, how many times they clicked. But point being, we're giving those chiefs tools that they didn't, and data they didn't have access to before on that. And then the third is measuring risk reduction. Like, we actually can measure who is taking action. Have they taken action on the right thing? Can we prioritize it? Every single person on our system has work to do. Every single person. Like, no
Right.
one, no one has a perfect house. Like, for, no one, right? And
Yeah.
but we can get people to take action on the top couple items each year. And so, going back to our talking to fire departments, if they want to essentially, be more efficient, engage their residents with better tools, and actually measure risk reduction, then across the board we win universally.
Okay. So let's say you show me these tools. I say these
Mhm.
look really potent, powerful, effective. Other people say they work. I don't really have time to do this.
Mhm.
I believe your tool works, but I would like to contract this as a service. Is that an option?
So we're software. We do have
Right.
some of our partners will use third-party contractors, if that's kind of what you're getting at. They'll
Okay.
use third-party contractors to do the evaluations. Um, and so there's kind of like, the way I would summarize the model that we think about it is, let's say let's say, and I'll, won't mention them by name just for privacy reasons, but there's a fire agency in Oregon. They've got a couple people on staff, and what they've done is they've then sort of deputized, using that word loosely, a whole bunch of
Mm.
volunteers. They've used
Okay.
our training module to get those volunteers to be like at standard. And so then
Right.
they use those volunteers for the first level because they're unpaid labor, if you will. They get leverage in their community out of that. Anything that gets identified as a higher priority gets kicked up to somebody who actually works for the department who can do a tier 2, and then you can
Okay.
roll it up. So that's one model. And then we have other
Okay.
places that do anything and everything in between, just hiring private contractors to having people on staff.
Okay. Yeah, I was just, running the analogy like my house is dirty. You show me this amazing vacuum cleaner. Could you just clean the house for me? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have, here's what I would say, like, I think we've seen in the, there's all these different segments of population when you get down to the
Right.
resident, right? There are people, well, I'll back it up a step. There's willingness and ability. We always talk about those two things. Is somebody willing to do something? Do you really believe you need to make a change about your house for wildfire? Some people don't think that. They'll be like, my wood fence is fine. I mean, people say that. And you're like, so that's a willingness problem. It's not an ability. It's nothing. The second is maybe they're willing. Now, do they have the financial ability, the wherewithal to do it? So in our platform, once you understand where somebody fits on that willing, think of it like a 2x2, right? Where they
Yep.
fit on that. Once we do that, now that tells us how to engage with them. So say somebody's willing and is not able, low income, doesn't have the financial means. Well, we have a grants module. We have the whole grants platform that manages all these different grants, from BRIC grants down to state to local. So now I can say to you, hey, you qualify under low income. I'm going to offer you $3,500 for defensible space work if you do these prioritized items. Okay, so again,
Right.
using an example of how do I drive behavior and drive nudges.
Yeah.
That's one level of it. We also have we have a lot of second homeowners in some communities, the Tahoe Basin, some of these communities, 50, 60% of the homes are second homeowners or secondary. So then we get into places that I call the easy button, which is, okay, the fire department gave me a list of things. This is a $1 million second home in a resort community. I just want to put my credit card in. I just want to make it go away, kind of thing.
Right.
And so very different kind of interactive tools for the resident in those situations. And I could get more nuanced.
So what happens
but
then? Who do they give their credit card to, and who does the work?
So a couple things in there I'd say is, first of all, because this is coming from like local government can't play favorites. They can't pick contractor X over contractor Y, right? So it's always sort of like, here's a list of approved contractors that have been vetted, qualified. Some fire departments, we've seen them do things where they'll only put people on the list if they've met certain training. So they want to have, again, qualified contractors.
Right.
Other people are partnering with like non-safe, sort of roundabout way of getting to the point is there's a list of approved people, usually that's open to the public for government compliance reasons. At that point, the private resident is going to interact with the contractor or themselves. They're going to have a private transaction. They're going to pay that individual directly. And local government's job is not to be in the middle of that at all. It's really just here's what you need to do. Here's resources to solve it. Let me help make it as easy as possible for you to connect those two worlds.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess comparable model would be, I filled out the thing. Here's the things I need to do. I don't want to do it. Can my quote of what needs to be done be forwarded to these contractors on the list, and then they will reach out to me with their quote?
Pretty much, that's right. And what makes some of our tooling pretty powerful is if you think about, get down in the weeds on some of this stuff. But if I tell you, this is what you need to do around your house, Steve, this is the order you need to do it. This is coming from the fire department. So this is what you need to do. This is where it is on your property. So physically located. Here's photos of what I want to have done. If you're sending that to a contractor, it becomes very easy for that contractor to bid on the work, but also know what's expected, kind of what success looks like. So we're seeing in one Northern California county, we've had a contractor tell us they use our reports. He's like, we don't have to go on site to do our pre-evaluation. It cuts about 20 to 30% of our overhead off because we don't have to go for the first free trip, right, to do the estimate. And so they're passing that savings on to the homeowner and splitting some of that. They're able to essentially bid cheaper because they have access to the resident shares the report with them, which is pretty cool to see. So we've been pretty happy with that.
So what's it like to come into a space that was traditionally a government space and be bringing all of that, that CEO business experience that you have to the space? Does Does it feel like you're bringing in a special ability? Does it feel like these people don't understand what I'm talking about? Both? Neither? Because government services are not provided generally by people who come in with a business background like yours.
Yeah. It's a great question. So I'm going to go with both, and I'll tell you why a little bit, right? I think there's two things is that we've seen kind of play out. So my background before this was in a marketing technology company, a financial technology company, and hands up, I didn't come out of the fire service. I've really kind of fallen in love with it, but I didn't come from that world at all. What I have seen, though, is that a lot of people really appreciate and respect that different perspective. I mean, the best fire departments are lifelong learners, right? You look at these fire departments, after action reports, pick everything apart. And so like these these chiefs, they're the equivalent to running a $200 million tech company. I mean, they have that kind of the skills and capability and budget. So they do embrace different points of view because that's what a good leader does. So by and large, I've seen it's been open and receptive, where people are very receptive to innovation that like a company like Fireside brings in. It's been kind of my experience. The call out I would say is, and I have to check myself, is sometimes we'll use terminology or we'll talk about, and I won't pick on anyone, call them out by name, but I was talking about things like a control group in marketing, because all of our messaging, when we do things, we do a control group, right? We take some people and we don't send them anything. And, I'd been talking for probably 10 minutes and he raised his hand. He's like, what's a control group? And I realized, I was like, that's fair, right? This has been an operational chief. He knows things about wildfire I'll never know, but I had sort of embraced that. But he was open. He's just like, look, I don't know what words you're saying right now. So from that standpoint, I think it's been, I think overall a plus would be my take on it. So
good. I would expect you to get a warm reception, and you're dealing with people who are struggling with a big problem that want help.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one of the best things, our second year of operation, at the end, we do like end of year reviews with all of our clients, and was having lunch with it. And one of the chiefs came to me and he just said, the fire overall chief said to me, he's just like, thank you for helping to support our mission. And we actually printed that out and we put it on our wall, right? Because I was like, it's like such this touchstone to all this point of like, we're doing, like, he knows he has a mission to help his community. Like, he knows that, like, there's no, in the fact that we're able to be a piece of helping him execute against his mission and supporting his mission. It was, again, like I said, we printed that out and we put it on the wall, and we kind of think about that as kind of like a North Star for the company.
Well, you're in an industry where there's a lot that you can be proud of. It's not controversial. You're not trying to sign people up for the Vietnam War or something like that. You're just trying to help homeowners keep their homes and stop communities from burning down.
Yeah, no, for sure. I do think where you get into, some people do get worried, is like, the level of data collection. And I don't know if we'll get into that, but I ask, I mean, for the most part, generally, yes, it's people are very receptive. We're helping support their mission, but there's always some people that ask questions like, oh, what about all this data? Should the government have this data? But so far that hasn't really been too much of an issue. Even in some of our most conservative, like dark red counties that we operate in, certain parts of the world, call it the most blue. Common theme is people don't want to lose their homes to fire. To what you're saying, like, that's a common unifying thing across all communities, and so helping people in that mission is pretty unifying.
So, how did you go about the process of converting marketing tools that had been used in other industry into marketing tools for fire? Was it just a matter of content swap, or were
I think what we've seen is, so I mean, there's a couple things that have come into play in that, right? The distinctions or the unique factors are what is sort of ground truth around a home. Where's the dead tree? Where's the firewood? What's the home made out of? Siding, wood roof, metal roof, all these other, like, these attributes, if you will. And so, like, how do you take what are attributes about a property and then kind of intersect those with who the property owner is? Because, the exact same house, let's just say, for example, you and I are neighbors, house was built at the same time. If I'm renting my home, my authority to do things on it may be very limited. I can't change the windows because I'm a renter, right? Where you own it. So there's these two attributes, not only human behavior, which, like, do you want to change your windows or not, or change your wood roof, that kind of thing. But there's also just like that, again, that relationship you have to the property. Very simplistically, how you think about and then break all those things down into sub-tiers, and sub-tiers is like kind of where the magic happens inside of the marketing platform, because you have to have this intersection of relationship to property with property attributes. And it changes. You rent it,
Right.
you was a home, you sold it yesterday. Tomorrow it was an Airbnb. Now so it's a second home, and then you take it back. I mean, like, these things are not, they're fluid literally by the day.
So someone could have the desire to have the new windows. They could have the budget for the new windows, but they don't have the authority.
That is correct. They don't have that, right? That's right. And then the landowner sells that home, and now there's a new owner in there. Now you've got to figure out where that person, maybe that person doesn't know anything about wildfire, or they don't care, or I mean, you can just, or the kids got the home because mom used to be there. I mean, there's just all these scenarios that like come into the
But how do you
mix. And
populate the specifics of that?
I mean, that's part of what kind of our software platform does is, right, we sort of
Okay.
look at, like, I'll keep it simple for purposes of our chat today, right? But we're sort of looking at what we can harvest and bring in from public record information. So, like, there are parcel data with the tax that is known, who's the legal owner, those types of things. Properties that are listed as second homeowners, again, those are known attributes. You have registered to have your home be an Airbnb, all those kinds of other stuff. And then, honestly, when the resident or whoever is living there, or residents, because there might be many residents at a place, when they start to interact with the system, we're sort of asking questions and looking at them, kind of things. So if they come into the system and they immediately are going to choose Spanish, well, we now know we need to meet them in Spanish as their language from now going on forward, right? Kind of thing. If they come
Right.
in and say that they're a short-term renter or long-term renter, and again, we can just sort of like ask some questions to then start to build a little bit of a persona around what that resident looks like, and then know what the right messaging is. If you tell me you're renting the home, it is pointless to me to really tell you got to make a big change to the outside of the structure. You just don't have the
Right.
authority. I have to
Right.
go to the property owner, right, if I'm going to make a
Right.
change there.
Okay. And the renter might think, so what? The house burns down. It's not my house. I rent
Yeah,
someplace else. I mean, because
there's
they're going
that,
to lose a lot of assets and whatnot. Like, no one wants
but
that.
I'll give you the other side of this that we've seen is sometimes people, like, if they're renting, they
Yeah.
actually don't want to do anything that will cause their rent to go up. So their concern is actually, I
Oh,
mean,
wow.
we see this. I mean, so now it's the renter saying, please don't give this information to the owner
Oh, my
because I don't
goodness.
want them to increase my rent. And so, super complicated problem. But if you're public policy, right, you're trying to increase the safety of a neighborhood, and yet you have the resident begging you, the fire department, please don't share this with the owner because I am afraid my rent will go up. How do you solve that? Right. And anyways, I
Right.
mean, how you work through those problems are pretty complex.
And when you're marketing your property that you want to, to attract renters, having the fire compliance side of it met, yeah, increases the value of the property to a renter.
Yep. Sometimes. I mean,
Right.
truthfully, sometimes. And some
Right.
people are just looking for lowest common kind of thing, right? I
Sure.
mean,
Sure.
that's we've seen mixed. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I think we've seen mixed in like the fire resiliency score, how that plays out in like the real estate transactions and the rental transactions. I mean, truthfully, when's the last time anyone's listening, rented an Airbnb in Napa and thought, before I rent this Airbnb, let me see if this home I'm renting in Napa is set up to survive wildfire? Probably zero, right? I mean, it's not been part of that part of that equation yet. It's changing, but not
If you're
yet.
going to sell your house, though, if it's met the compliance and you have the sign in your yard,
Yep,
that carries weight with buyers.
definitely.
Maybe not
And
for
then it
every
ties
individual.
into like some of the, being able to insure it, obviously the ability to like
Right.
what that risk profile of that is. And in certain states, including California, there are regulatory requirements about what has to happen at the point of sale, which the local fire department has to manage. And so again, we manage that for all those fire departments, right? How do you track, is this home in, again, California, it's Assembly Bill 38, AB 38, is this home AB 30, have they met the AB 38 requirements? Are the disclosures there? And so, like, going back to efficiency for government, it's a lot of overhead for a local fire department
It's
to
huge.
track
Yeah.
these sales and keep up with them and do the report. I mean, it's just a mess. It's just a lot of manual work, right, at the end of the day, but we streamline that for them quite efficiently.
So in your ideal world, uh, every municipal fire department has a contract with you, and you manage the outreach relationships with them. Um, so what would have to happen in your business for that to be the case?
Well, I mean, so
Or
yes,
is it
we want
already the
to,
case? Are they
no,
are they all your clients right now? Or
no, of course not. Of course not. Right? Like, there's always the hang outlier. And I think, so what does it take is the kind of the common threads I think we've seen, go back to is, fire fire departments that are looking to sort of change, I'm going to summarize as just change how they're interacting with their residents when it comes to wildfire. Just whatever that looks like, and you can put, different, but fundamentally they're saying, we've done this for a while. It is time to run a new play. And we had a chief say this to us in the Tahoe Basin. He's like, look, we've been doing defensible space for 30 years. Like, that is not new. But we want to run a new play. We want to do something different. So by and large, finding, that becomes like a thematic change, or a fire department that's ready to kind of embrace that change a little bit. And then also, I think fire departments that are really recognizing they need to be data driven around this. Yeah. How do you, I mean, truthfully, how do you say what is the riskiest 10% of homes in, say, the Tahoe Basin, or in, pick another community? Well, you need data. You need to know what does that home look like? What are they doing? What changes have they made? All those kinds of things. And so for our clients and our partners, we can actually help them really understand, here's your riskiest homes. Here's what they've done to change that risk over here at the community level, where the bigger picture on some of the stuff, it lets the community start to publish how they're reducing risk overall, which ties into reducing insurance. And it has all these secondary effects if the fire department can actually do that. But at the core, what we're talking about here is the fire department saying, I want to engage with my residents better. I just want to have a better resident interaction. And I recognize the value and importance of data in showing that I'm reducing risk in my community. And when those two things hit, then it's just like, it's just a matter, I don't know, then it's just about filling out paperwork to get them on board, right? That's sort of...
Yeah. So once you've given them the tool to build this better relationship, are there other goals that they use that relationship to achieve? Increasing the number of volunteers, or increasing contributions, or increasing other aspects of community engagement?
Yeah, so we are seeing, that more and more from, I'll think of it just, summarize it more in community risk reduction and how you're going to execute against community risk reduction. Very simple example. You're going out to look at a property and it's got a propane tank. Well, you're looking at the propane tank for clearance, for all the reasons that are very important for fire safety. Well, guess what? In California, those propane tanks should have an earthquake tie-down strap. So if somebody has gone to the trouble of looking at all these propane tanks, all these other things, at that moment in time, you can also record, is there a tie-down strap for earthquakes, right? Kind of thing. And I use that as a very simple example, but it's a real one where you're understanding community risk reduction. Have we reduced the risk of that propane tank falling off in an earthquake? Answer yes or no. So, similarly, you're looking at the roof, or you're looking at the side of the house, and let's say you see solar panels on the roof, or you're seeing a battery on the side of the house. Knowing where those things are, given some of the potential ignition sources and some of the other kind of collection, and just all this other information that truly isn't like wildfire in the moment, wildfire relevant, but is really relevant to community risk reduction, becomes in there. Short anecdote because it's fun, but we had a fire department that they're going out there looking at and what they were finding was a lot of people are using extension cords to basically power their Teslas. So they're running these extension cords across their yard, across their grass, to then reach where the car was on the street. We're recording that for them, and they're thinking about how to reduce that, because the concern is those extension cords overheat. There's like fire risk of that. It has nothing to do with wildfire, but it has everything to do with the fact that you're on the property and you're looking at this different kinds of things.
Well, it absolutely could trigger a wildfire.
It can. That is true. I mean, especially when they're running. I mean, we've seen photos of people like literally running it through like dead vegetation and grass, and you're just like, oh no, if that thing, I mean, that could be your ignition source.
So yeah, the homeowner, you've got to wonder, would I rather risk the extension cord catching fire and have to put out my lawn, or would I rather bring the car into my garage and risk the car going off and it's burning down my house?
Yeah, or they don't, or it's, I mean, this is where like I talk about meet people where they are. Yeah, or it turns out that they're a renter and they don't have access to the driveway because it's a shared home and the owner uses that one car garage and they I use that for my car. The renter can park out there. What do you do if you're a renter with a Tesla? I mean, like, what do you do, right? You've been told so those kinds of situations, those kinds of things. And how do you help the fire department educate both parties about that risk?
And the renter doesn't want to install a charging system in the house because it again becomes the property of the owner.
Exactly, right? I mean, it's a complicated problem.
It is complicated. It really is.
But it's fascinating, right?
One of the things you like about it, right?
Definitely. No. I mean, every day we see interesting examples, and we see, just the wide range of people. But I always come back to those, those unifying themes. The local fire department absolutely wants to reduce risk, right? They want to reduce risk in their community. They need tools to do that. And that's where, a company like Fireside comes in, because we can really help them reduce risk more efficiently at the end of the day. If you sort of summarize it all down, that's what we're able to help them out with.
Within the context of this show, are there websites that viewers or potential customers could go to look at to see exactly what it is that you're offering?
Definitely. So, I mean, shameless plug for us. If you just go to Fireside, FIREASIDE.com. If you go to fireside.com, we have testimonials from different fire agencies that have talked about how it's making a difference for them. There's case studies, there's illustrative year-end examples. I mean, there's quite a wide range of assets out there. And then we also do webinars every month on different topics and usually bring in a guest speaker from a different fire agency. They're kind of designed to be for fire departments. It's not general public,
Right.
but we get
Right.
50, 60 people on each webinar. And so if people want to get the website or contact us, we'd be happy to put them onto the mailing list for the webinar. And it's all about knowledge sharing, but it's always driven around, here is how, example, here is how somebody is using, grants or financial assistance to
Right.
change behavior. Here is how somebody's using targeted messaging and targeted SMS messaging to change behavior, those types of things.
Very interesting. Tell me about the work in Tahoe. You've got Burn Box working in there and other agencies. And how do you coordinate, or do you coordinate the activities of these various vendors? Or what does that collaborative process look like in terms of coming up with a plan for making a safer community?
So Tahoe's, amazing place. Obviously, a little special in my heart as well. But Tahoe, so I think you have a combination of things. I think you had Amy on the show recently from the Tahoe
Yes.
Funds. You have an organization in the form of the Tahoe Fund that is able to accelerate adoption of technology using, essentially using private funds to do things. And then you have a set of and a long history actually of like the fire agencies collaborating around the basin across state lines, across county lines. So, you already have this like multi-jurisdictional history of how these agencies work together. So back it up. The ingredients are innovative departments with a history of collaboration around the entire Lake Tahoe area, a source of funding to help seed new ideas and get things in there in the shape of the Tahoe Fund and Parasol as well. There's two organizations that do that. And then the third, from our standpoint, how Fireside fits into that is almost, I would almost think of it as like the layers of like the onion or the layers of the community going out. Think about the structure, think about the property line on those private properties. How do you get the homeowner to do their part and make sure that center of it is resilient, hardened? That's Fireside. Okay, that's what we do, and that's how the agencies use us. Now I want to get into like fuels work at the boundary level as it's approaching the community. Well, okay, that's places like burn bots in there, other types of mastication and other types of work, and then you get into larger fuel treatment plans and other types of things that are happening out there. But so that coordination layer is it's almost summarize it. And again, think about like the Tahoe Basin. Where are the riskiest homes? Well, the Tahoe has done a lot of work to innovate and understand like risk by parcel and all these other things. So what are my riskiest parcels? Where's the most likely entry points of fire into the community? How do I make sure those homes have done their work to like start like step one? How do I make sure the nearby forest has been treated and managed and then extending out? So it's been pretty effective. Tahoe Basin's doing some really, really amazing work.
Very innovative. So when you look at a fire progression map, right, and you say like, if this home goes, we're going to lose those other 15 homes. How do you increase the leverage on that? On those keyhole homes.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you make it? It's in everyone's interest that those homes be properly mitigated. Maybe it's even more in the interest of the neighbors' homes than that homeowner themselves, depending on the value of that house.
Yep, absolutely. So everyone's got their own term for it. We call them castle homes because we know what else to call them a while back, thinking of like a castle wall, right? If those homes can effectively hold the line, then that can produce, spread in there. And so, it's something we've been thinking about for many, many years, to really try to like get into that, the specifics of that question is there's a couple things you need to be able to do that. First of all, you have to know what's around these homes. What's going to receive embers, right? Do you have firewood? Do you have open vents without, with insulation hanging out of the vent? Because they, just literally like a fire wick almost into the property. You have to know that. And that means you got to get on the ground. You got to go look at these homes. You got to go find these kinds of things. But once you have that data, now you can do the modeling on it. And there's there's several modeling companies out there. We're not a modeling company. We just kind of move the data in and out. But those models can show you the different propagations, likelihood of spread, ember spread, all these things. We take that model data back and then can sort of almost, to your point, map out point to point to point how that would sort of move through the community. how does that all tie back now? Now you can say, well, if I interrupt that spread at this home or that home,
Right.
I can
Yeah.
actually calculate downstream how many homes would be protected, what the potential
Right.
savings are. And therefore, as a government agency, you can help justify investment dollars into a specific, into a specific home that you might not make across the street. And I mean, we have an
Right.
example of a community in the Bay Area where, I mean, we are literally delivering grant dollars to micro targets of, let's call it 20 to 25 homes in micro targets, because we can
Mm-hmm.
show that these particular 20, 25 homes is where we need that mitigation work across the street. While you're still important, you just don't
Right.
need that same level of dollars or the same level of investment, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
so again, what we talked about at the very beginning, I bring it back to government efficiency. Very limited dollars by the public, by public dollars to put into this. If you're a city trying to deploy and you've got $1 million to deploy, how do you understand home by home where to put that money? And are they even willing to do it? I mean, we have
Right.
examples where people will show up and like, I will give you money to change your siding, and you're like, I like
Well,
my siding. Okay, what do you do now? Right?
you send tin
Uh,
men over there. Right.
yeah, exactly.
Right. Yeah. No.
It's hard.
So if a home, would there be a basis for a law, like they do with the highways, right?
Hmm.
Right. Say, okay, the city needs this this spot. We're taking your home. Blah blah blah. Right. Eminent domain. So
Yep.
could they designate certain homes as key fire transmission sites, where then they would have the authority to mandate the updates?
I mean, I would say yes, in theory. I think the legalities and the practicalities of that, I think you're minimum 10 years before that. And I'm not a lawyer, but I would just
Yeah.
speculate that would be 10 plus years of litigation, through the Supreme Court and et cetera, to see if that is doable. Is that really like a
Right.
justifiable public good? And also, I think in the current political climate, I'm not sure that, public rights are pretty strong. You know what I mean? So I just
Yeah.
fundamentally think that, like, the short answer is yes, in theory, probably really, really hard in practice, if
Yeah.
not nearby impossible. And certainly some states would be a hard no compared to others.
Sure. Sure.
So I just don't think that's viable. And you talk to most fire departments who have either had to done some abatement work where they've legally gone in and done some other work, and they'll tell you, they're like, it is really, really hard. You spend, you have to go to court. It's several $1,000s. I mean, there's time, there's all these things.
So they've
And
tried
then
it. Yeah.
they do. I mean, yeah, they'll go in and some departments will, there's examples of departments that are doing those things, and they'll send the property owner a bill, right? We're doing this work and these kinds of things. But it's sometimes also, contractors don't always want to pick up that work because they don't want to get a terrible review on Yelp for doing work in an area. Like if someone goes, this person did this. I mean, there's liability if they back their truck into the side. I mean, there's just like,
Sure.
I promise you this, dollar for dollar, it's so much easier just to go and encourage people to take some action than it is to try to force them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And we've seen that play out. So
we're talking dollar for dollar, and ounces of prevention and pounds of cure and whatnot. To what degree are government agencies seeing the value of the investment in prevention as opposed to the cost of suppression?
So I think we have examples. So we've been, doing this for about 5 years now. And so you're only coming up on this past year, 2024 was the first time that we had multiple examples of homes that had been evaluated, done the work in our system, and then were threatened by fire in some capacity, right? And there was always suppression teams in there as well. So that, there was wildfire and there was wildfire response units. Overwhelmingly, those homes that did the work that had been recommended all survived. They had suppression teams on them so that the suppression could do. There were all the parts of the puzzle worked in there. We also saw, there's a case study on our website that links to this, an example in Ross Valley fire where homeowners had done all the work. No homes were lost. It torched up to the side of the house stopped. And long story short is the fire department was able to say, like, look, we contained this thing within a couple hours. It
Right.
worked. And therefore, we didn't have to bring in aviation, and we didn't have to bring in all this other, we didn't have to do all these other things that would have been,
Right.
I don't know,
Expensive.
millions of dollars by the time the response package was all said and done, right?
Yeah. So is that data an effective tool in getting people to spend money on prevention? Because when I looked at the budget, it always seemed like the prevention budget is a finite thing, and we have to apply for grants to do it, and we have to find people. But the suppressions, once there's a fire, whatever it costs, I know nobody's saying, okay, we'll work on this fire up to $500,000 and then we're just going to let it go. Like endless budget there.
So I think two things around that. So you're right, and I mean this is not just a fire issue. Look, I mean, how much money do we spend? Go to health, go to pick a subject, right? Where we're
Sure.
happy
Yeah.
to spend gazillions of dollars on once somebody gets sick, but we spend very little on that, like
Nothing
that,
on making
or
sure they
early
had enough
education. I mean,
items.
we can think
Right.
about any sort of public good. Where I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's just
Right.
human nature. So I don't accept that. What I think is changing is a couple things. Is that there are departments are being asked and being asked by the community to essentially reduce the risk and show how they're reducing the risk. So there is just this overwhelming demand of like, I don't feel safe, and it's trickling through. We touched on, but like it's trickling through the home sale process. It's trickling through, as we know, and not trickling, it's like to tsunami through insurance, right? So the
Insurance.
community has felt the problems associated with not doing prevention, and that's why I think over the past couple of years you've seen so much more interest in dedicated funding for prevention activities. But at the end of the day, I think we'll outrun, I don't know what, how many 10,000, 20,000 years of human nature of like
Yeah.
probably not, right? To be
Yeah.
honest.
Unfortunately. Right.
Yeah, right. I mean,
What do you see as your next, your next phase of operations? How you're planning to expand in a way that you haven't in the last 4 years.
so I mean, I think so. We're continuing to see geographic expansion. I mean, we're in 8 states, but that means we're not. There's several states that we're not in, and so we're just in the cusp of hopefully kind of and then just in 2025 we'll be opening up a couple of new markets. I think that will geographic expansion is part one of that. Part two of that is also just a lot continuing to invest in the tooling to make these fire departments that much more efficient. I mean, we've got several new things we're going to roll out in the big 25 kind of spring 25 release that we've been testing, and we tested them all of last year in beta testing, and are pretty awesome as far as being able to increase speed of data collection on the field, increase the accuracy of it, so we can get essentially more inspections done or more evaluations done for less cost. And then
Okay.
secondarily with that, also just get a lot more and continue to invest in the resident engagement side of things. So growth wise, it's geographic expansion, just new markets, and then product wise, continue to build into the things that have gotten us so successful so far.
Tell me what you're excited about in the new product rollout.
All of them. They're all how do you pick a favorite child? I think so. Things that we're really intrigued by is a couple different. Is one of the, we call it, how do you allow for right of entry? So I'll give you very simple examples. A lot of people the fire department comes to their home and maybe they're not home. And guess what? The fire department, by Fourth Amendment, can't go in the backyard. I mean, they're not authorized to. And so the
Right.
homeowner does not get an evaluation. They only get an evaluation of the front. Well, what we know data-wise is that the majority of the bad issues are in the backyard, because people just have messier
Oh,
backyards, right? Like we keep our,
sure.
curb appeal. And so
Right.
principally by not getting to the backyard, we have not educated the homeowner on some of the riskiest items on their property. Okay. Just again,
Okay.
like ABC fact kind of thing.
Right.
Well, so what do we also know is that a lot of homeowners are saying, I don't mind if you can come on my property. I would give you permission to come on my property tomorrow if you're going to be here. Like, that's great. I would love you to do that. So we've got this whole module coming in that's all about how does the property owner give right of entry? How do I give the fire department permission in a limited, controlled way? Because I don't want the government just coming onto my property. So how do I give permission? How does the
Right.
person in the field using our app know they have permission? How do they know if there's a dog on the property? I mean, there's just like all these myriads of complexities that come into it. But the end result is I just need to get more, we call them 360s. I need to make sure every home gets an evaluation, and I'll tie this off with that efficiency bow. If the fire department comes to your house, it takes them like 5 minutes more to go to your backyard. And so
Right.
like the incremental cost of getting that access is negligible versus having to make another trip 2 days later because, I'll be home on Thursday. Those types of things we really kind of push into. So that's just one of many things that we're pretty excited about.
And I guess you have to confine the use of that data to the fire department, because the people who do the home appraisals,
That's right.
right, that decide how much taxes you're going to pay, they don't have access to the back, right?
That is correct.
They can only do a home appraisal from a drive-by.
That's
right?
correct.
So the fire department's going to know that you put on this 10,000-foot wing on the back of your house that the appraisal doesn't know about.
That's correct. Yep, this gets into all this,
Right.
somebody builds an unpermitted deck. Well, that deck may not be safe from a fire standpoint, and it might be really risky if you've got this unpermitted deck or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
The fire
Right.
department's job here, and they're very clear about this, is they're not enforcing permit or
Not enforcement.
compliance,
Yeah.
right? They're here to say, I don't care how this deck got here. I'm just going to tell you you need to screen this deck in so that embers don't get underneath it, right? That's
Right.
what we need to do to protect the structure,
Yeah.
not passing judgment of whether this was
Right.
appropriate or not. So
That's good. What
yeah.
is your biggest success story in terms of agency that you've worked with? Like,
Good question. I mean, I'd probably pick on a few that I'm super passionate about. I mean, Marin's where we started, so that's kind of like our longest running place of data, and they're doing some pretty
right.
interesting things. So I probably, thinking about that, I'd probably pick two spots that I'd like to just highlight. One is a place like Marin, relatively affluent, very long history of like innovation around wildfire and stuff like that. It's been happening, and has a dedicated tax measure. We're seeing really, really good results at scale on how to like incrementally moving the riskiest items are getting taken out of the system year over year over year. And we can like demonstrate
Right.
that, prove that the risk of wildfire is like systematically changing in Marin, at the residential level, which is pretty awesome. So I'd probably go there. I take the next one I'd take on the other end of the spectrum is up in Plumas County. So Plumas has had just terrible fires. I mean, terrible, million plus acre fires, right? A couple of years ago. And so you have a fire safe council. They don't have a ton of funding, but they're crushing it. They're just absolutely out there, and they've told us that our tools have let them better engage the community. They're getting more work done. They're getting to more homes. They're able to track what they're doing, and so you have this like small group of grant-funded nonprofit in what is one of the riskiest wildfire counties in America, right? I mean, so like the
Yeah.
fact about Plumas, it's like 20% of the water in California collects in Plumas, riskiest wildfire county, relatively low income, relatively rural, and you got a handful of essentially not volunteers, but nonprofit working in nonprofit, carrying a pretty big load, and we're able to help them make a difference up there. So I'm super excited to see. There's the two ends of those spectrum for you of
Yeah.
spaces, but it's
They're
cool.
both experiencing really great success, and both things, that you should be really proud of.
Yeah, no, we love it. Love it.
That's good. So new states are coming. So you're in 8 states.
Yep.
What's coming on board?
So we're pushing into the Pacific Northwest more. If you sort of look at our growth, so we're kind of California, Nevada, Arizona, Colorado kind of has been the growth, and so now you're in Oregon, and so now we're starting to see a lot more interest kind of into the north. So Washington, Idaho, Montana, kind of in those directions, is kind of is sort of like from a state growth standpoint. And then the other space I'd say is we also see, we got our first client in Tennessee, which was really interesting.
Wow.
We all know Gatlinburg and some of that whole area around
Sure.
Pigeon Forge has certainly had some bad fire. They're suffering. They have the same challenges. A lot of homes in the mountains. Fire has been, there's been significant fire loss, significant fire risk up in there. They're seeing drying of vegetation. All these considered inputs are sort of coming into the equation for them. And yet they need tools. The person in Gatlinburg who was doing all the defensible space was doing it on paper. Drive out there, fill out a paper form,
Yeah.
come back to the office, type it up in Word, take his photos off his phone. I mean, like doing an amazing job, doing everything he can.
Right.
But one evaluation was taking him 4 hours because it was like 3.99 hours was staff manual time. And we've just eliminated all that for him. Right. So,
Right.
so super excited about that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Does there have to be a certain level of community awareness or concern about wildfire before that their agency, is going to sign?
And I'm going to say, I'm actually going to go with no. I mean, the agencies
Okay.
that have tons of fire experience, of course, it's easier, they jump on it, it's easier to find fun.
Right.
But we have a couple of examples where I just think you have a very forward-looking, maybe it's a fire marshal or a deputy chief or someone who can kind of, truthfully, he or she sees a little bit of the writing on the wall and is able to find a little bit of budget to get some things going. And I'm thinking about, one of our agencies in Texas, arguably whether or not the community is there with him yet, but he knows this is coming. He knows this is going to be an issue for his community. And so he's pushing, he's doing his part to try to prevent that. I sometimes feel like, in his case, he might be like one voice in the wilderness, but that's what you need.
It's the realization that there's, two kinds of places on the world, right? Places that are on fire and places that are going to be on fire.
Exactly.
And moving the needle on those going to be on fire places is a little harder, because they Well, we don't have fires around here.
Yep.
Well, you haven't, but you're going to.
Yep. And some of these departments also are thinking, hey, if we can start just shifting the needle a little
Yeah.
earlier, then maybe we don't have to wait till we have something as tragic as like a Santa Rosa or we don't have to go through something as a
Malibu.
Marshall
Yeah.
Fire, right? Or whatever to actually
Right.
change public will. Maybe we could make a difference. And, they're the outliers. I mean, I wish you could say that was everyone. They're definitely the outliers, but that's also how movements change. I mean, you need people like that are pushing, right?
Sure.
And then that makes the
Sure. And
difference.
I would imagine the earlier they can start building those relationships, the sooner those will become longstanding relationships, and then the more amenable the citizens would be to respond to requests from the department.
For sure. And repetition is the name of a game. I mean, there's a reason,
Sure.
there's a reason they put like, whatever the highway speed signs up over and over and over again, right? Because there's
Right.
repetition, right? And so I think it's a
Right.
similar play here. Like start talking to, if the community's not thinking about wildfire, wherever you can bring it up, start injecting it into those conversations, bringing it into just to different moves. If the community's already very like aware of wildfire, interjecting into when they're hiring a contractor, making sure those contractors have, are going to bring up, hey, actually, I'm going to put in a metal fence for you rather than a wood fence. Like that. That's these moments of intervention that you can do as a
Right.
community to change outcomes.
Conversations about wildfire. That's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me on Fire Break today, Jason.
Thank you so much, Steve. It's been a pleasure. Really, really enjoyed. Appreciate all the
Fascinating.
work you're doing.
You've been fascinating to learn more about what's under the hood at Fireside and what you're working on. So I appreciate that. And folks want to get more information, 𝐿Fireside.com is the place to go check that out. And who knows, if you go to that website, you might end up having your own conversation with Jason Brooks. I'm Steve Wolf. You've been listening to The Fire Break. The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire. Till the next time, stay safe, and we'll see you out there at the fire line.
Thank you.